Hey everyone, it's the Nitty Professor. Let's talk colorwork. I love colorwork. Y'all saw my video yesterday about another colorwork sweater that I've started, and one of the things I love about colorwork is that it can be very freeing, that you can often, depending on your level of ambition or the amount of mental energy that you have, you can kind of go your own way with it, have some fun. Take random yarns or yarns that you just like, put them together, make some patterns, some images, and just go. I mean, if you can do stranded colorwork, if you can hold two strands of yarn together and alternate them, you can have fun and you can create something like this. So this is one of my favorite colorwork sweaters, and I just can't tell you how much fun it was to make this. So the concept behind this was fairly straightforward. I have my ribbed bottom and collar in the navy, and I went through my stash, and over the years I've managed to collect a lot of what I call workhorse yarns. Worsted weight. This is a worsted weight sweater. A number of yarns from like Peyton's, for example, or equivalents to that. Yeah, just your standard worsted weight yarn. Some skeins newer, some skeins older, some skeins, it's like something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. It's like I might have bought some, I might have gotten them Goodwill, might have inherited them, and I was just like, how can I put these together? So I just had a lot of fun. I had this idea of a repeating neutral kind of, recurring stripe with, so the cream and the gray alternating with these bigger fields of bold colors that they go together pretty well. And there might be a few things I would have changed about this. For example, the llamas here it's a little bit hard to make the llamas out. It's a little bit tricky to make the birds out. I probably should have used greater contrasting colors. Now these birds down here, even though they're orange, they work out pretty well, but I'm really happy with the goats here. This level of contrast with the two different olive hues just worked out perfectly. Same thing with the carousel horses at the top, which managed to sacrifice their poles. I just turned them into horsies, which is another way to have fun with it, right? I could just, kind of let her rip. And I think the end result is quite satisfying. Very pleasing, and I can't tell you how much fun it was to make, because every time, I didn't really plan everything out ahead. Every time I finished a block, like the birds, then I was like, okay, what's my stitch count? And what size repeat can I make? How frequently? So I could have, like, maybe, say if 220 stitches, then you could have a repeat this 20 stitches. You've got it going 11 times. Or if you want to build in some gaps between, like, the birds here have, I think it's like maybe if maximum one column of stitches going between them. It depends on the motifs. Like these llamas here, it looks like I have 3 columns going between them. And those are things that I would decide as I was going along based on, how many stitches I have going across. I did this bottom up, just so you guys know. And same thing with the sleeves. The sleeves have different motifs. This is an owl motif here that I found in a different book. I've got some bunnies down there at the bottom. So I tried to make the height of the motifs on the sleeves align with the height of the orange stripe, the blue stripe, the green stripe, whatever, on the body. But we have different stitch counts, different, situation. I may want to just do something different as opposed to having the same chickadees. And for example, I carried over the llamas. That was pretty easy to do. But yeah, in the bottom one, I went with something different. Just, because why not? And I also had to adjust, the number of rows in the sleeves may or may not be the exact same as the number of rows in the body. So, for example, you can tell here, this row of cream and silver ended up being a little taller over here. My goal was, of course, at the where the sleeves join the body, got some pilling, nothing new. Obviously to have those meet so that when I got to the yoke, then everything aligns and ta-da, we've got one broad stripe on the yoke. So I managed everything quite well, and a lot of it was just like basic math, to put that together. Now, these neutral stripes that interrupt the bolder colors and kind of provide like a structural unity, I used in those what are called Peries, and I'll show you what that is momentarily. So more neutral, like geometric designs, instead of something more like realistic or representative, I did geometrical, like there's some diamonds or there's just some random Peries. And you can find Peary motifs that are really quite small. Could be, for 3 rows with maybe, a motif that just occupies 1 or 2 rows and a few columns, as it were. This sweater was equally fun to put together. Those of you who recall the book that I was influenced as far as like the general layout of these stripes on this one, I did sort of use like a guideline as far as the arrangement of the horizontal striping patterns. But then when it came to the actual colorwork motifs, I just grabbed fun stuff. So here we have like baby lions, here we get some flowers, here we have poodles, maybe they're dachshunds, I don't know, maybe they're just like long poodles. And here we have more, it's like a leaf motif that I found, and then I chose these bunnies on top. And this is a good example here, this orange row of a kind of a Peary motif where I've just got 3 rows, or 4 rows, actually it's 3, and it's just almost like a lace pattern. And I repeated those, and I had different sort of random stripes just crisscrossing, sort of being influenced by a basic overall colorwork design that I found in a different book. And this sweater, a lot of you, when you see me wearing this, you're like, that's so pretty, which I have to agree. And this was a lot of fun, again, to just improvise. This is variegated yarn that it doesn't even, it's not even like self-striping per se. It just, it's almost like those, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the brand. Well, there's certain yarns that just, it's like almost like a fade. They're kind of like fades. It's Feederbrook Farms. Feederbrook Farms is the yarn. So, I mean, you could argue that it's self-striping. You can kind of tell what the background yarn is and what the foreground yarn is. The background yarn is more cream and yellow. The foreground yarn has some blues and greens mixed in with the gray. And I just stuck with those two. I let it play out as it would. And I just chose motifs that I enjoyed. So, for example, you can see in the body, there's some very fantastic kind of birds. I'm going to show you some books where I got those things pretty shortly here. And just almost Baroque, lots of curves, lots of freedom. And it was kind of a challenge because these are the kind of colorwork motifs. I mean, those are kind of almost like peacocks there. That you have to do a lot of counting. You have to really watch which row you're on. And these, I don't know if these are like lovebirds or what they are, but you can see how they touch at the beaks and they touch at the tails. And they're just so sweet. Now, but on the sleeves, I was like, well, I'm going to do something different. And I found different motifs. So I tried to arrange things at like comparable heights and that, so that they would kind of blend together. But as you can tell, I just went kind of crazy choosing completely different motifs to put on the sleeves until I attached them to the body. Again, bottom up, these motifs here are just so much fun. And again, I'll show you where I got them. And you can make up your own right, but I have ways of mining motifs, and I'm going to explain that to you here shortly. But just so much fun. And between the beautiful yarn and the sort of fantastical motifs, these are all sweaters that I probably wear more than some of my other sweaters, just because, well, they go with a lot of things, right? Because they have all those colors in them. But they're just so much fun, and they're striking, and people are like, oh my gosh, where did you get that? And I'm like, well, I made it. And they're like, really? How did you get it? How did you do that? And I'm like, well, I kind of improvised. kind of improvised. Anybody can do it. Again, if you can do stranded color work and you can do basic math, you can make sweaters like this. But let's look at some resources. And if you've been with me a long time, I did a video, it's been years now, on a similar topic, but I'm going to kind of expand a little bit here. So my favorite book to mine is this one by Alice Starmore. It's called Charts for Color Knitting. So I'll try to link this in the description. But it's just fantastic. In fact, this book is so classic that it had to be published by Dover. And we all know that Dover, they really publish things that are significant. And of course, this is the new and expanded edition. So Starmore's book is a fantastic starting point. You could, I mean, this sweater is like predominantly based off of this book. So, and, I think you can take this and you can also use it as inspiration to come up with your own colorwork motif. So, the book is divided in 2 sections, which is, I just found it helpful to kind of map like what's in here, So, by country, you've got, knitting patterns from Norway, Russia, South America. Then you've got, she's called adapted patterns that really kind of go a little bit farther afield to the, the Far East or Greece or Celtic patterns. And then more motifs, she's calling it the continuing story, birds and flowers, sea and shoreline, and quote unquote the inner landscape, which I'm going to guess is kind of like more imaginative. And then she has some stuff here about color. Now, some people feel like they want a leg up as far as like choosing color. I just kind of go by the seat of my pants. It doesn't bother me to pick my own color schemes. I grew up with an artist mother and an artist sister and have always basically just trusted my instincts. And some people might disagree, like what I came up with, and think, well, I would have done differently, which of course. But if you want guidance on how to choose color, how to arrange color, how to group colors, how to have colors play off of each other, this kind of thing, then this has some really useful information that you will appreciate. And you can play with it, right? You can do swatches. You can try out different combinations, especially when you're doing like a variegated yarn or yarn that fades, like what we were talking about with the Feederwork Farm, which a lot of Fair Isle knitting, that kind of falls under that category. Fair Isle sweaters, they can use all kinds of different colors. You can use like 18 different colors in one sweater, and that can make it kind of complicated. To me, it was like simplifying things to take this color lot from Feederwork Farm, which has the creams in it over here, and then this other one over here that has more greens and blues, and then I'm just going to alternate it the whole way through. So just using basically 2 colors or colorways, even though they have, each has multiple colors that kind of played out. You can kind of see this is a similar thing going on here, right? Now you could pick all your different, like Alice Starmore yarn, or, you could pick a white, a beige, a pinkish beige, a pink, etc., and do all the striping and have just tons of ends to weave in like that. But you could also do my approach, which is when you just take a yarn that's more of like a fade and do it that way. And then you have, a little bit less labor as far as weaving in ends, but you also have less control, right? Definitely less control, which didn't bother me because I was enjoying just what's going to happen here. It's like the excitement every day. Ooh, it changed to a yellow. Oh, cool. Today we're doing more of a cream. That's cool. Makes me calm, or turned into more of a gray. The blue morphed into like a green blue, and then it morphed into an olive, etc. So I don't want to, break copyright or anything here, but just kind of flash, let me see a few of my favorites up here. And you can kind of see how they turned out in the sweater. Now here, just to give you an idea, she also gives you ideas how you can take the motifs that she has. Like here she's talking about, well, this is a paneled sweater. That's how you can arrange motifs. This would be totally like you're knitting it, you're taking the vertical and you're changing into a horizontal and you're knitting it that way. And I haven't tried that. I just have this bottom up. I'm in a bottom up rut, So I like to do the horizontal stripes. And then, I've done steeking. I'm not afraid of doing steeking, but do I seek it out? Not necessarily. Here's another, just giving you pattern arrangement ideas. So it's like a compendium. There's a lot of great advice and prescriptions in here for how to use the book as far as taking the motifs that she gives you and playing with them in ways that are maybe a little bit more predictable or orderly. So here, these are from Finland. So this page is Finland. Now I would just immediately gravitate towards those birds there at the bottom. I just love to put animals in my sweaters. And here's a similar page from Finland. These, I might call these Piris. These could be all over designs, but you can also take like just, okay, these little squares or these little zigzags. And you can play with them, and you can, I really like the idea of having like interrupting the bolder stripes with thinner stripes that are just a little bit more, they're like easier in the eye, and they give you like a little rest, you know, from the bolder areas of striping. You could also, I mean, you could just do squares, right? And you could stitch them together. I mean, really, there's just no end to the creative possibilities. Let me just kind of look at a few more things here. Here's some bigger, these are called, she's calling these single motifs, you know, so you could take something like that and you could make like squares like I was talking about, or you could just, you do like tarja and just throw them in the middle of a sweater. You could do whatever you want, you know, it's just, it's like fodder. And this is an example of me doing my little mathematical calculation. So she's got these birds, and I'm like, okay, I want to integrate this one, but I got to do some calculations. Like, how many columns do I need between each bird so that adds up to my 220 stitches or whatever it is that I have on there? And what about, do I want to, like, toss anything out? Do I want to, like, alter the motif a little bit? And doing all the addition, like, if I repeat this 25 times, how many stitches is going to be, et cetera, et cetera. I can probably just tease you a little bit with something that I did that for. Yeah, here's like, you can almost see where I took the one of those bird motifs, and I was like, well, I don't want this blank space in here, so I'm just going to add a little curlicue, because and I added one at the bottom. And part of my rationale for doing that was that also carrying over the yarn on the back can be a little bit tedious, you know, and so I was like, well, I'll just put a motif there, and then I won't have to do the carrying over the yarn across the back, and what do you call that? Like, you know, when you've got like floats. The floats. I didn't want my floats to be too long, because then you have to, you know, tie them and twist the yarn over itself so the floats aren't too long. So I was trying to avoid long floats, and that's why I added those curlicues, so you can do whatever you want. Here's this grease page. It's got these leaves. Well, I wanted my own leaves, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go off of that, but I'm gonna make my own. And that's how this book can just be such a resource, because you can take what she's got, but you can also play with it. Here's another example of, I was trying to avoid long floats, so I added little birds to the big birds. And again, I'm doing all this math and counting and stuff. Like, you see all the numbers that I wrote on that baby, just to calculate like how many rows are we using here, and is it going to line up with the sleeves, etc. You know, it's a fun math exercise, and I'm not opposed to math. I forget how to do algebra. I need to go back and relearn it, but I felt comfortable with it, and I just love all these birds. I integrated so many of these birds into that one sweater, as you can tell. Here you can do like corn and wheat and stuff like that. That's from the Middle East. I guess it's corn. Seashells, the sea, the shoreline, lots of really cool stuff in here. So I highly recommend this book. I can't even tell you if it's in print, but it should be available. I didn't have any trouble getting it. So that's kind of a fundamental book if you want to have fun with color work. And here's something else. This is by Mary Jane Mucklestone, and she's got more than one book, but this is like a basic one. It's 200 Fair Isle motifs, Knitter's Directory, and this is expressly for Fair Isle. It's interesting because in the book that I'm editing now, book 4, one of my main characters is explaining the difference between stranded color work and Fair Isle, and how Fair Isle is like a subcategory of stranded color work, and it's just like a kind of stranded color work. But this is just incredible. Now, keeping in mind, again, that in a lot of Fair Isle, they just are asking you to do incredibly detailed levels of striping. You could potentially do this in a smaller number of colors. Like, you know, do we have to have the yellow seeding to the green and then back to the yellow and the white? Like, could that just be one color? But in any case, it can get pretty complex in like small scale motifs with Fair Isle. It's a very unique version of Colorwork, but it can also give you just, again, incredible resources for developing, you know, like, I mean, somebody had to make these designs up, right? So there were like traditions with the X's and the O's, and that's like the basic foundation of Fair Isle. But obviously, you can move on from there and develop like different floral or star-like, but it's pretty geometrical. Like, you're not going to find Fair Isle sweaters that like have cats on them or tractors or stuff like that. So it's going to be this kind of thing, you know, maybe snowflakes, flowers, ivy type things. The motifs are generally going to be on a smaller scale, but you're going to have all this vertical striation with the color and playing with that, which it can be gorgeous. You know, it's very detailed. I mean, some of these I like the white with the orange and purple in there. It's just really, really, really beautiful and exquisite. But personally, I'm not like I'm not such a devotee of Fair Isle per se, but I just like this for the resource. These are excellent. You know, if you need those stripes that give you a rest from the bigger, bolder motifs, then you can go towards something like this or something, you know, like these. And it's just really helpful. And then you can kind of take what's here and you can kind of go off and adapt it. Maybe you need to change the stitch count a little bit. Here's your traditional X and O. That's like the foundation of Fair Isle right there. Or you want to make it a little bolder, or you want to make a whole sweater out of, you know, this kind of thing and just organize it the way you want. That's why she wrote this book, because you can take it and you can just do what you want with it, and you can expand the whole vocabulary of Fair Isle by, you know, using this as a resource. So I highly recommend this book. And there are other ones, and if you guys want to add your own take on what we should consider using, feel free to add that in the comments. There's a book, I know I have a book somewhere that specifically mentions Pieris, which are the really tiny motifs that you would do in a smaller stripe. I mean, to me, I would consider these little motifs at the top here on this Norway page, I would consider those what they call Pieris, as opposed to, you know, like bigger ones like these. That's definitely not a Piri. But look it up. You know, she's like calling those all over patterns. Now, another great dimension of colorwork, stranded colorwork, that is liberating is called hen knitting. And some of you know about that. I got this book, which is devoted to the concept of hen knitting, and it's just so much fun. It's called Knit Yourself In. I do not know if this book is readily available. I found it, I knew about it, and I was like, I gotta have it, and I had to work to acquire it. It's from 2015. So you might be able to find a used copy. You might be able to find it in a library. But hen knitting is, you know, it was like a fad in Denmark, probably decades ago, like, you know, I don't know if it was like 90s or something. It probably even goes back even earlier to like 70s. But the idea is exactly to promote this idea of creativity, creative knitting with color, and to push you to be open to the idea of developing your own patterns. There's even, you know, in the contents, there's a whole section on design your own pattern, find patterns on the internet, and keep it like varied, no two the same. There's stuff in here about the tradition and the push to just enjoy yourself, just to have fun when you're doing colorwork. They've got little chickens here. Who knows? Maybe those are the predecessors of the emotional support chicken. I don't know. But stuff about yarn, encouragement on as far as how to go about the designs, and then they give you a lot of ideas, and it's just endless. So look at that. We've got crabs, we've got elephants, got tractors, or I don't know if those are just old locomobiles or automobiles. They look a little bit like tractors. And here's like an outcome of that. I mean, isn't that wild? That's just insane. Now for me, this is probably a little bold, so you can kind of tell that I like those areas of like rest between the bold motifs. Just, this one, I mean, I've got multiple rows there where it's just one color, or it's like one little stripe, and then I have the bolder ones, and it's just a little tamer. But you can just have so much fun, or think about, how much joy that would give like a 7-year-old or something like that. It would just love wearing something like that, especially if they could help pick out the motifs and the colors. And a lot of the sweaters, the example sweaters in here, have patterns. I mean, this is just crazy cool. Look at that. That boy looks like he just is in his element, in a sweater that he probably helped to design and come up with those motifs. Let me see if I'll try to pick out a few good ones here. I could go crazy with this stuff, but here's just a perfect example of a kid. But you can have fun for yourself. You can be as bold as you want, but you can also pick colors that somehow say who you are. I would probably go with my neon colors. I just really like neon colors, and some people might want more subdued colors, and you could use like more natural colors. Here's something that's just, it's a little bit more, dare I say, mature. I mean, it's gorgeous, all those different flowers on there. But it's not quite as bold or out there as the ones that we saw before. Here's some socks with the hand knitting. It's got, I think those are supposed to be lips, little tulips, all kinds of things. So this book is like a compendium. Here's a fishing themed one. You could pick different themes. You could pick like children's toys, or you could pick cat themes, or floral themes, or dog toy themes, or nature themes, or architectural themes, or you can do whatever you want. And this book has all kinds of different patterns. And I have sometimes just mined this book for specific. It's like I want a dolphin, or I want a boat, or I would like to find some kind of flower, or some kind of animal motif that's a specific dimension, like a 30 stitch repeat, or a 15 stitch repeat, and I just need some ideas. I mean, look at this goes really, that's crazy, how sort of grand you can get with your design ambitions, as far as mapping out motifs that are on a bigger scale. Here's one with dogs that is also in the hand knitting category. And that, you might have to be even more artistic than I am necessarily. I'm more of a musician to figure out how to, make a realistic dog show up in 2 colors in stitches that are knit. But here's another, this one, I like the colors on this because there's a lot more harmony and blending with, basically like a handful of colors with the browns, the whites, and then orange and blue. But it just looks so beautiful, and it's so much fun, and it's personalized. And I think that's something that a lot of people are seeking today, is to express themselves, especially when we're talking about slow fashion. That's something you might end up wearing years. You don't necessarily want to have to, have H&M or Forever 21 just written all over your body, when you can write across your body things that you love. And this is a book, I'm sure it's available in English somewhere, but I picked it up in Stockholm, and it's the same idea. And some of you have been with me for a while, you know that I found my octopuses from this book, but it's the same sort of thing, right? With a lot of different examples of hand knitting and just inspiration for you can put together a lot of different colors, a lot of different motifs. Look at this jacket that this guy has on. It's just, you can personalize things to such an extraordinarily freeing degree, and you've got a lot of inspiration, a lot of how-to, a lot of, there are all these charts in here, and they're literally organized by the number of stitches across. Like, these ones are 16 stitches across, and these ones are 18 stitches across. So if it's like, I need a motif that's 20 stitches across, I can look through here and see what they've got, Here we got my favorite cats. And then lastly, I want to share a book that I have not yet mined to the extent that I would like, but this is another resource for stranded colorwork. It's called Knit Sonic Colorwork Sourcebook. And this gives you ideas for how you can take the environment around you and convert those, whatever it is, rocks or books or a rug or something, and you can convert it. You can work on all, the way the colors could line up and get some theory on here about how to choose colors depending on the effect that you want. And then you can go out in nature and take inspiration, or you could even just look in your kitchen. Or here's this whole section on finding inspiration in things, drawings, technological devices, and sort of gives you some strategies for looking for color, looking for form that you could then convert into knitting patterns. Here's some ideas for how you can sketch these things and put them in grids, and then convert that into colors and knitted motifs. Here's one that's just called The Wonders of Electricity. So this is literally based on the idea of electricity, and that's what the author, the artist, came up with. You can just go hog wild. Maybe it could be something about music. Maybe it could be items that are associated with a certain person. This one is being called Seaside Socks, and the colors and the motifs are supposed to be reminiscent of maybe the movement of the water or the sand. This a section here on architecture, finding inspiration in buildings and places, colors. Here's one, I think this is a really cool, inspiring image about using bricks to come up with a colorwork design that could be integrated into socks or a sweater or maybe a scarf. Has different palettes to share. The idea of using palettes is very appealing to some people who are afraid to sort of just go out on a limb and do it themselves. Here's one that's called Art Deco. So this whole motif set was developed based on Art Deco architecture. Here's one that's called My Street. So this book is a wonderful resource for figuring out how you can take something that you love, which could be the environment, a collection of items. This one is called, it's called A4074. It's just shading. I don't even know. Maybe it's a road. I mean, we've got this inspiration of this landscape here, and then somewhere or other, that inspiration has translated into that set of designs. But in any case, I think colorwork is a uniquely rich sort of, creative canvas that you can write with. It's almost like a writing system where, depending on the resources that you gravitate to, here's one that's based on plants, you can just be yourself, and you can expand your creative energy and express your individuality and your skills and your, almost really your dreams, just the way that you want to see in the world and to be seen in the world based on the clothes that you wear. It could be anything from, socks to gloves to hats to sweaters. It's just an incredible, expressive opportunity that is specifically available to us knitters, and I'm sure there's a way to do this in crochet. Haven't tried it, but you all can add information about that. But I thought I would just kind of share a little bit about how much fun it is to be colorwork crazy and come up with things that you're going to cherish for, probably for as long as you're able to wear sweaters. So on that note, I'm going to see you all later. Take care, and we'll talk soon. Ciao.